Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of your weekly dose of Terraform. Today I'd like to continue working with Speakeasy, and I want to continue developing Terraform Provider for Open API or OpenAI. It's a bit confusing name. And I also have Thomas Rooney, who is working for Speakeasy. So if we stuck into something, or if we have anything what we want to get his feedback on, we will be able to do this. Isn't it cool? I think it's cool. So, well, I don't have a specific agenda, like extremely specific agenda, I would say, because I want to hear questions and problems or hesitations or concerns which you guys may have. So feel free to write them in chat, and I will make sure to mention them, and it will be all right, I'm pretty sure. So let's get started. And the way we start is that we click on this button. Right. Okay, so the plan for today is the following. Last time, 2 weeks ago, we had an episode where I looked into Speakeasy and Speakeasy. It's important to understand what is Speakeasy. I'm currently in the Bay Area, and recently I was driving and I saw a car, like truck, staying, and it was saying Speakeasy. So Speakeasy is some sort of delivery company here in the Bay Area, and I was so surprised that that it's the same name. So hello from sunny California. Wow, cool. We have someone from sunny California, because in place where I am right now, it's not so sunny. It's pretty chilly, but it's good. And there are also some wildfires, which are not currently affecting this place where I am, but you never know. So hello everyone, and very good morning. Yeah, for some of you it's probably good morning. For me it's noon. So Speakeasy, what is Speakeasy? Well, imagine that you have your project and your product, and you developed some API schema, and you want to generate some SDK for it, right? Because you want people to interact with it using different programming languages. So you expect people to interact with your API through Go, Python, TypeScript, and so on. But at some point you will realize that, well, there is actually a Terraform as well. And what Speakeasy is able to do is that with the same Open API YAML file, they will be able to generate Terraform provider for you. And that's exactly the best part of it. You don't have to write your Terraform provider yourself. You don't have to know internals and peculiarities of Terraform in order to make it. I personally find it extremely useful for situations where you are not really Go shop, or you don't interact with Terraform, or you don't know what is Terraform, what is infrastructure in a very detailed way. Actually, a couple of days ago, I attended a conference here in the Bay Area, and I talked to a couple companies who were specializing in providing some value. Of course, they want to have more customers and so on. And I found it extremely useful for them to be able to continue providing this value, but through Terraform interface. And Terraform interface is exactly Terraform provider. So I'm almost certain that this company will become customer of Speakeasy, just because there is no easier and no better way to automatically generate Terraform provider. Of course, there are some limitations where you want to generate significantly more than what you can express into your Open API schema, but there are ways to extend this information and go beyond that. For today, I'd like to continue focusing on OpenAI, Open API schema, which is publicly available and publicly provided by OpenAI. And I will look into some resources, and I will make some new resources. I have not tried adding these new resources before because I want us, well, I actually like when people suffer and when people feel pain, to be honest. Maybe we will see something not working and we will go through some challenges, and that's exactly what this live stream is about. It's about education, and it's about showing how we are able to resolve different problems. So, without further ado, let me introduce Thomas as soon as I figure out which button to click, which is the hardest part. Where is this button even on this screen? Ah, yeah, I guess it's here. Ta-da! Yeah! Oh my god, fantastic. Hello, Thomas. Great to see
Hello,
you.
Anton.
Great to
Yeah,
see
good
you.
good to be here. Good to see you again.
Cool. So let's get started. Well, for those who are new, maybe you can introduce yourself and say a couple words about what you do.
Sure. So my name's Thomas. I'm a founding engineer at Speakeasy. As Anton has introduced us, we provide Terraform Provider generation as a service alongside SDK generation as a service. We actually use our Golang SDK to produce our Terraform Provider service. Kind of meant to be a sort of a one-stop shop where if you have an API and you want to expose that to the Terraform ecosystem, and actually CDK, Pulumi ecosystems as well, because there's loads of bridging products from a Terraform provider. We kind of want to be the partner to companies trying to get their API live and in front of a bunch of DevOps engineers.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you for
Yeah.
having us.
And you mentioned that Pulumi and well, not just Terraform. So I don't think we ever mentioned Pulumi, but is there is a possibility, or is there is work in progress by Speakeasy to generate Pulumi as well? Because I don't think I saw word Pulumi here. Pulumi?
So
No, there is no
the
Pulumi.
Lumi ecosystem, or actually the Terraform provider ecosystem in general, has a bunch of bridging products.
Mhm.
Um, so uh, to build a Pulumi provider, generally you kind of build a well. There's a few different ways, but one of the ways you do it is you build a Terraform provider, and then there's a Pulumi Terraform bridge that you can use. And it's the same thing with the CDK AWS cloud formation ecosystem. There's a bunch of bridging products that kind of
Mhm.
take Terraform providers and pull them across into other ecosystems. So we've
Yeah.
been actively investigating that and trying to help our customers get into other ecosystems beside Terraform.
Right. It's actually a quite interesting situation, or a quite interesting week, I would say, to talk about all of the license and change which has happened during last week when HashiCorp announced that things which were previously open source and they were released under Mozilla public license and people were happily using it without any consideration, now should be reconsidered. While I don't want to go through this right now, honestly, but I just want to say that for most people who are watching this stream, like literally 99.999 people, it does not affect anyone. I don't see how it will affect pretty much no other projects, including Terraform AWS modules. It affects only competitors of Terraform Cloud, and I'm not big supporter of OpenTF fork, which I don't know actually how it's even possible to make. And in general, I'm I just want to make sure that people understand that despite all the drama which is happening, we'll still have Terraform, and there will be still huge need in providers, generator, and all possible tools which you know out there will survive, will exist. This license change does not change them in any way. And there is already a question. Love to hear top 5 pain points, pitfalls of Terraform. It's quite funny to ask these questions, especially during last week, where a lot of people think like, oh, Terraform is going to be disappeared. What should I replace it for? Well, there is no other tool which you can replace Terraform with. So do you want to say from top of your head, Thomas, what's your pitfalls of Terraform? Maybe you look at it from your kind of code generator perspective. What's your opinion on that?
So, I mean, I guess I have an opinion just as a heavy user of Terraform. I think it's really easy to make Terraform specifications that don't always encapsulate your resources safely.
Mm.
So there's an approach that I kind of call the layer cake approach. I don't know if that's the right name. Maybe you'll know what I'm talking about, Anton, or maybe this is a neologism that isn't well known. But like making like all the important stateful resources like databases and uh, Kubernetes clusters in one big state blob, and then doing an independent thing with all your stateless resources, which are going to undergo high flux, like
Mm.
your Helm charts or your images, or tying together your network and your security groups. And I
Mm.
have found that if you don't do that right, it's very easy to do a Terraform apply, and you're actually got half an hour's downtime while a certificate's regenerating on the cloud.
Yeah.
So to me, that's the biggest pain point of Terraform, but that's not unique to Terraform. That's just in the sort of infrastructure as code space. It's a set of incredibly powerful APIs, and so you've just got to be careful you don't accidentally destroy stuff when you're operating with Terraform. You do have to apply a little bit of mindfulness with your Terraform applies, even if it seems incredibly magical when you're doing an apply.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure that this is actually quite common, I would say, what you just described. I'd like to add that one of pitfalls from my side, especially when I talk to customers, is that they don't really always understand the possibilities of Terraform and the amount of resources they can manage exactly the same way. It's not always just AWS and that's it. You can manage quite a lot of things like Helm releases is one of common things. Uploading and downloading files, for example, on S3. Not huge files, but managing content of, for example, configurations and sync it with S3 bucket is also not very well-known topic. But also making files locally, especially configuration files, is also pretty common things. A lot of people think that, okay, I have AWS resources and I will manage AWS resources with Terraform and that's it. It's a good start, but you can do much more. And the second big pitfalls is that there is like there is just too much information out there and people don't really understand what is best practice or what is just noise. A lot of time people implement something what they think is really creative, but it's not going to work in the long run. But again, it's not problem of Terraform. Terraform is just a tool which will not disappear in the next week. So, okay, let's move on. Let's do some coding. How about that? So, when I say coding, I mean that we can. Where is my view? Here is my view. Okay, then let's do the following. Or let's actually look into what we did last time and build on that one. So what is Speakeasy given for developers? One aspect is that you have two ways to do this. So Speakeasy contains CLI, which you can run on your local machine or in your pipeline anywhere, and it will be doing something for you, like you provide input file your Open API file and you have something back. Additionally, you may have access to Speakeasy dev website where you specify what kind of provider you want to make. You specify where the code is supposed to be stored, and then you provide GitHub action or you add GitHub action into your repository, and it will run the same Speakeasy CLI on the Speakeasy um, pipeline in your repository, and you will have every night or every day there will be execution, and some new code will be pushed if there is something new to be generated. So this means that you can have a pipeline which will be executed, and it will be constantly updating your provider. Well, it will be only publishing this code here. So for example, if I look into what has changed, then I can see that 2 days ago, Speakeasy bot tried to generate something in my account. It also did quite a good job by updating releases markdown file so that I can see what exactly has changed. And it's constantly using latest version, and it's updating it quite nicely. It's also really important to understand that whatever I do here, like by adding this GitHub action, I'm not actually publishing it right away to the Terraform registry. So yes, it just added some changes because there were some changes in either Open API spec, which I provide, or inside of Speakeasy CLI. In this case, it was Speakeasy CLI where changes were introduced, and that's why provider was updated. This provider is already published in the registry, and as you can see, it was published pretty much manually by me 2 weeks ago, and all new changes which were added by Speakeasy bot are not reflected yet. The reason for that is that Speakeasy CLI is not, or Speakeasy itself is not actually connected to Terraform Provider yet. And it just pushed new code. If I want to release it and publish it in the Terraform registry, all I need to do is just to make new release here. I need to make new tag, and then Terraform registry will be updated. The way how to do this is pretty much how we do how we handle the creation of new releases. Exactly the same way as with releasing of any other Terraform provider or Go application. So it's, yeah, it's okay. Let's move on to something better. Okay, what I mean by better is that I want to add new resources, and I want to use Speakeasy CLI, and then these resources will be added. Pretty straightforward. As I said, there are two ways to do this. One way is that I can run Speakeasy CLI command locally, or I can let Speakeasy service to do this for me every night. Let's see. It's actually deleted all resources. We could fix it though. I'm not sure I understand this.
Yeah, sorry, just dropped a message to Anton. So the Speakeasy CLI is configured by a GitHub action, and the GitHub action that's in this one, if we open it up, it's currently pointing directly to the OpenAI Terraform, OpenAI Open API spec. God, that's a mouthful. But that one doesn't contain the changes that we did in the last stream. And so what we need to do to make this work is just point it at the local file here with our changes, so that when Speakeasy CI is updating it, it's pointing at the stuff with Anton's entity changes. I mean, usually if you're building an API, you'd kind of point this at your root source, and you'd upstream all the changes we did to kind of annotate things into the original Open API spec. But here we actually have a minor kerfuffle, but it's
Well,
quick enough to fix. The make would fix it because yeah.
well, this OpenAI YAML file here is something what I pushed 2 weeks ago when we worked on it. So it already
Yeah.
includes all of the changes which I need. So what you are saying is if I now run git pull on my local, it will be overridden by Speakeasy bot, or?
Oh no, this file is perfectly fine. The slight problem we have here is in the .github folder. We have the Speakeasy GitHub action, which just
Yeah.
isn't pointing at this file. So if you open up .github and then look at
I see.
the action configuration there.
I see. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I see this file. So inside of, let me add you. Okay, here you are. Right. So what you say is that if I add inside of Terraform Provider OpenAI repository, there is .github workflows Speakeasy SDK generation. It is pointing to this file, right?
Exactly, yeah. So we just make that /openai.yaml instead, and then it would pull it from the local repository as opposed to the one without our modifications in.
OpenAI.
I think OpenAI, yeah.
No, OpenAI YAML, like this. Yeah, it's called.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so now if I push this change, it will be, next time it will be working as expected, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. I don't have to edit right now, because let's add something else, something smart there. So, okay, that's a good change, really a good idea to point to the same source file in two places. Okay, so let's look into Speakeasy CLI command. I have updated it, so I'm using pretty recent version. And Speakeasy generate SDK, lang Terraform, and provided OpenAI YAML schema. If I run this code now, it will take a little bit of time, not a lot of time, and it will generate schema for 3 resources, as we can see here, and that's exactly what I want. So now if I do git status, I will see that some changes being added or being introduced. I guess a lot of these changes are actually related to the fact that Speakeasy CLI itself has changed recently, but it's not really making a lot of new things, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of these changes look like because we had the GitHub action pointing at the previous one, it might be related. I'd actually have to look at the git diff to double check. I think, for instance, we kind of upgrade a bunch of dependencies on behalf of the users that we maintain. So the Terraform plugin framework, for instance, we've done an upgrade for that recently. Not sure if that's made its way into the CLI yet, but things like that tend to change on new releases. I think in these, it's most these added things. Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So this was related to the fact that GitHub action was pointing to the wrong source. That's why it is exactly the same change actually, but it was not pushed. Okay, so if I now git add all of this, and if I now git push, let's do git commit, and I will just say that this is the main idea here is updated Speakeasy SDK generation GitHub action workflow source. This is the main idea what I added. Yeah, of course, push to main is the best decision. So yeah, okay, now we are good. So now we will not have surprises like this in the future because GitHub action will not override it, will just append it. So let's do that inside of OpenAI YAML file. I'd like to add new resources. Previously, what we had, we added a couple resources, no, 3 resources: chat completion, and image. By running Speakeasy CLI command locally, we were able to get examples so we can see what kind of use case and what kind of parameters we need to specify, and that was great. Now, if I want to add new resource, all I have to do is pretty much go into OpenAI YAML file and add a couple lines here. So the line number 1 is the following. So inside of embeddings, because that's pretty much new, I will have to add this annotation, this attribute, sorry, which is called X Speakeasy entity operation, and I need to specify embeddings create, where embeddings is actually name of the entity. So I need to do this inside of pass, which I want to add. So in this case, passes slash embeddings, and create embedding. It's hard to figure out which one is plural. Yeah, I guess it should be singular here. And then create embedding request is actually a definition of an entity. So I need to add just these 2 new lines, right? Now, if I add, after I added this one and I run the command Speakeasy generate SDK from the same file, OpenAI YAML, I run this command, and now I can see that it was able to collect 4 resources, where one of these is called embedding resource. That's pretty much it. Now, if I look into resource documentation, I can see that there is new folder which is called OpenAI embedding. And that's pretty much it. So Speakeasy was able to generate example. This example looks a little bit ugly, but well, I usually tend to say that's live, but no, that's not live. We can always auto-format it. What's really interesting here is that by adding these 2 lines of annotation, we should be able to now run this. If I go to my demo folder, which is somewhere here, tf-dos, and here is Speakeasy tf, right? I will just add a couple things here at the very end, and I can comment out the rest of it because it's not really interesting anymore. So what I have here is that I added this OpenAI embedding code snippet, which I took from examples, and well, that's pretty much it. I specify input as a string and model and user because this was required according to Open API schema. Again, I don't know what is necessary. Speakeasy was able to process that for me, and I'm really glad. Then if I have this provider block here, I'm just expressing or explaining to OpenAI how to connect to this thing, to this endpoint. And the last line here is that I'm telling Terraform to use my provider, which is hosted here on Terraform registry. But as you can imagine, all I have done is that I have updated source code of my Terraform provider locally. Now the question, how can I tell Terraform to use this locally generated provider. And the simplest way to do this is that I run main go command, and it tells me that I need to replace, or I need to reattach provider, and my Terraform CLI will be able to get it. Let's see if I go to Terraform AWS modules, TF, those, Speakeasy TF. So this is where I have this main TF file. If I now export this TF reattach provider configuration, then now Terraform will be using source code which is located inside of this folder instead of URL from the registry, which is a very handy way to replace it without doing a lot of compiling or changing source codes. Okay, and now if I run, well, I'm not running Terraform anymore, I run in T, and then T init, and if I run T apply, it will tell me that it has to delete some things because I previously added this code into Terraform state file, so we can just simply skip it. We are interested in just this resource. So according to what I see is that it will be able to interact with OpenAI schema, and it will do whatever is necessary. I'm not sure that this is going to work because I may need to provide OpenAI API key. So we will see. Provider produced inconsistent result after apply. I'm really glad that we see some errors because Thomas was silent for the last 10 minutes. So
yeah, so
any idea
these
what
are fun. I do. So when you build a Terraform provider, what they're often trying to do under the scenes is kind of reconcile some state that you have defined against a server. So if you say, I want to use this particular model, right? I want to use ADA 002, and then you go, okay, right, push. Then the API responds back saying, I have created it, model ADA 002 v2. Then you've got to make a kind of call. Do you say, the API is acting a bit weirdly? Like I say, go create a server, but it said create this different type of server. And so what we do, and it's perhaps not the best behavior, is we say, okay, right, whatever an API is saying is the truth of the matter, we're going to push that into state. And then Terraform itself says, okay, that's weird. We've tried to create model ADA 002, but what actually happened is we made model ADA 002 v2. And so this is kind of an intentional decision on our part, and there's a few ways that I can walk you through having to fix it. But effectively, when we're working with somebody who's building an API, we will either kind of say, okay, you have a decision to make. Do you want, when somebody makes an API call, to just kind of like echo what actually happened back to you? Or do you want, whatever they make the API call with, you just kind of take that as truth? And so here, there are two ways of fixing it. We could say, okay, this model text embedding ADA 002 is actually not text embedding ADA 002, it's 002-v2. So we could just change it locally. That kind of sucks from a provider perspective, the fact that something comes and says a bug, but that's fine. The user can get around it that way. And the other way of solving it is saying, actually, the provider doesn't care what was returned by the server for the model. Whatever the user says, we're going to store that in state. Don't worry about it too much. And so the way we introduce that behavior is we use this little escape hatch called Speakeasy ignore. And we can apply that to the response of the entity operation for the create request. And then
Mm-hmm.
when we apply that annotation, it says, okay, let's configure the provider slightly differently. We're not actually going to care about whatever the API responds for model. If the user says it creates with ADA002 and the server says 200, it's created. Don't worry about it. We're just going to store in state whatever the user pushed, and therefore it's not inconsistent. So I mean, either way, kind of providers are always trying to sort of paper over an API to make it very resource oriented. And something like this is a bit weird and kind of maybe implies Terraform Provider isn't always the right tool for APIs which do stuff like this. But if you want to use it with a Terraform Provider, you can we can help users paper it over.
Right.
Does
Is
that make
it?
sense?
Well, I think I understand it, but put it in slightly different, maybe slightly simpler words. Is that if user would say, generate me, or let's say we can ask CloudFormation, create S3 bucket with which starts with this prefix, and user say, let's say prefix name. User don't really know yet what kind of bucket will be created, so we cannot write into the state what bucket name will be right away. We need to wait for the sorter, and then sorter will decide what bucket exists, and then it will return. So in this case, we must listen to the sorter and must wait for the sorter to reply. We cannot blindly trust what user specified, because user specified incomplete information. And in your case, like
Exactly.
now, in this case, it's opposite. We don't care what server replied. We need to respect what user demanded in the first place.
Precisely. I guess a similar example would be is if you said, make me an EC2 instance and give it 4 GB of memory, and then AWS's API responded saying, hey, I made you an EC2 instance with 8 GB of memory. What should happen? Because, that depends. In this case, maybe AWS said, okay, now we can only make EC2 servers with 8 GB of memory. But then users still have Terraform saying 4 GB of memory. And so what should really happen is probably you should deprecate the old Terraform provider and say you can no longer create EC2 servers with 4 GB of memory. You can only make them with 8. And then the old ones now say there's a provider bug. It actually, there's something's drifted, something's wrong. And then you go look at what's happened.
Right.
In this case, if you're a provider developer, we
Yeah.
kind of need to make that decision now because we're both the provider developer and we are kind of a user. And so we're seeing all these edge cases that users probably don't see a lot of the time.
Right. And as you say, there is new annotation which I can add. It's called ignore something.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So we would go to the response object for this create embedding response.
So this one.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then we need to do two things. Thing number one is we say this is Speakeasy entity and embedding, because this is also an embedding. So we need to respect whatever this configuration as part of our kind of embedding resource. But in this kind of model type string on the create embedding response, we're just going to say, so on line 2753, we'll add an annotation that says x-speakeasy-ignore : true.
Speakeasy ignore, like this.
Yeah, like that.
Okay.
And then we'll regenerate the provider and rerun this. And hopefully it will work this time. Who knows? Maybe something else needs papering over. It's the exciting bit. Being a software engineer, right?
Exactly. Well, that's why we like what we do. Okay. Yeah, well, sound very much, very straightforward. And as you just said, first thing is that you connect it to tell that, hey, this is still the same entity. And then on property basis, you can exclude certain things and say, like, don't care about it. Yeah, I like this very much. Okay, let's run this command one more time. And let's go run. go, where is my go run?
So FYI, this is also how computed and not computed documentation works.
Oh yeah.
So in the Git diff of this, we get to see that previously something like model would have been computed. And computed means, well, it can come back from the server as well. And now it should see, in theory, and once again, I can't see the code, but that this isn't computed anymore. Whatever we set always has to be so. Here we go.
Yeah, looks good. I run it twice, no changes. Cool, fantastic. Well, we just added 4 lines and we got things created. I'm amazed, honestly. Let's look into the resource itself to see what exactly has happened, or how can we look into the output. So if I go to the code here, so here is my resource, and I want to look into Terraform state just to see what kind of information does OpenAI provide. And here is the magic. So attributes is something what I can get from the code. From the resource as an output. And there are a bunch of data. I guess it's some sort of vector, and it's so big that it's very hard to understand. I'm not good with floating. Okay, here is it. Model. Okay, I didn't understand what's happening. Maybe it's time to look into another place. So when I work with something I have no clue, I usually tend to look into documentation. If I have a lot of time, if I look into what is it, entity operation, this one. I usually like to see examples here. So, and examples here, which is written in curl, Python, and so on, are showing like how to interact with it. Will it be right, or will it be what is actually the way for us to look into this response and see and see something else? What can we do with this embedding? Do you have any idea how we can get it through and maybe see it for real? I'm not sure if
So if we were to go into OpenAI's dashboard, it's quite possible they represent embeddings in that way. So
okay.
we've got a few people playing with language models at Speakeasy, because we use language models to help generate OpenAI API specifications for users who don't really have them yet. We use them to help enrich specifications, to add in good documentation, which goes into their Terraform Providers and SDKs. Embeddings are kind of this concept which doesn't really make sense unless you are directly working with a language model. But I kind of imagine them as like a little database of text information that a language model can sort of access. That's not a very accurate description, but so we've used embeddings because we could load documentation sites, and we say, okay, the documentation site is embedded into the language model, and it's kind of like a bit of way of representing context when we're running it. That's not a very smart way of representing it, though. I am very far from an expert in LLMs.
Right.
It's magic to me.
Yeah, well, absolutely. It is magic for most of us who suddenly became interested in AI ML. Okay, so here is it. I just logged into my OpenAI console. Here is it. Any ideas? Embeddings. Here is it. How to get embeddings. So that's pretty much what we did, right? We created embedding, we specified text, and we got example response, which contains a lot of different things. So then what we can do with this Well, it's a bit tricky. It's a bit tricky, and I'm not sure if it's even related to what we want to do. Yeah, I propose that we focus not on OpenAI side instead, because we obviously created this resource. We got very large payload back, and we can access it the way we want. What I want to look into, like specifically to Speakeasy and Terraform Provider, is the way how this documentation is generated. So imagine that I push this code now to GitHub, then I cut the release, I make a new tag, and it will be published here. What I want to understand is what are the ways for me to extend this specific documentation. So specifically, I'm curious in knowing of ways how I can change something here. Because if we look into documentation, for example, for AWS, just of course it's not comparable, but we can see that it has a lot of text here, a lot of links, a lot of different examples, different ways to authenticate, and lots of different type of information here. So my question is, how can I go from this one, where things were generated from Open API schema, into something what is enhanced by the user themselves?
So this entirely comes from the Open API spec. So the easiest way of kind of working out what to modify is if you search for this little bit of text, OpenAI API. APIs for sampling and fine-tuning language models. If we search for that little bit of text in our Open API document, we're going to see the field which it's generated from, which I'm pretty sure is info.description, but we can go find out.
Right. Yeah, it is the main description.
Exactly. And so this can be Markdown, right? So users who really want to focus on this, you can do like a little pipe symbol, press enter, and then you can write whatever Markdown you want into your Open API spec. I think it's the pipe symbol. I ought to double check this. Let me.
Is it? Yeah, it should be piped.
Yeah, I think we just need to indent it like another two spaces or something like that.
Two more spaces. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Let's see.
But so underneath the scenes, there's two things that make documentation work. Most of these are there's like a go generate command, and that go generate command. So I think normally when we set these providers up inside Speakeasy now, we provide like a sample make file with all the commands to run. And so that there's kind of two steps to making a Terraform provider. The first step is this Speakeasy generate command on top of an Open API spec. And the second step is this kind of go generate command, which effectively walks through all the configuration we've set up inside the internal directory in this little bit of code there. And then it pulls out and makes a docs folder. And then all that then goes in the docs folder into the Terraform registry. So if you were to run kind of go generate /.. we should see the docs folder get updated with the latest changes that we've made into our resources. I will also see actually reformatting of all our resources, because as you saw earlier, they're kind of badly indented. They're slightly all over the place when we create them, which is kind of an unfortunate bit of code generation. It's kind of hard to do indentation right. Still working on that, but we don't need to worry about it because the Terraform format is going to sort us for it when we run this command.
So if I run go generate right now, it will update documentation as well as this one, where I add, let's say I add a new hello world. So if I run this command, then my documentation folder will be updated.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Let's see.
And so lots of companies, when you're building commercial API products, actually this Open API document, you're very rarely kind of
I mean,
updating it directly. Oh,
no, I used to generate SDK from it first, right?
oh, sorry. Yes, you're exactly right. Generate the SDK, then run the go generate. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so these Open API files, they're often generated by code. There's kind of code which
Yeah.
says, all right, let's pull these markdown documents from all over the place and we'll put them in our Open API spec.
Mm.
And then we'll take it from the Open API spec, we'll push it into the Terraform provider, and then we'll take from the Terraform provider, we'll make the doc. So it's like a multi-stage pipeline for getting things in.
Yeah,
So yeah,
right.
we can see a hello world now has shown
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, hello world is here. Okay, well, that was really easy. And as you say, code inside of this example is now up to date and looks much better. I mean, this code is not badly formatted anymore, as well as this code was automatically rearranged to look cool. Good. Yeah, so that was a pretty straightforward process. And again, I'm pretty sure that putting this into pipeline is not the hardest part, and is not actually related to Terraform itself. Is like the remaining bits is just tagging something. Of course, we can do this. So let's do this as well. I added hello world, so it should be eventually it should be reflected into the new documentation. So now if I git add everything, and if I push this one to my no, I forgot to commit. So what I did, added embedding resource, and if I push it, so all I have to do is pretty much git tag. Now I have 011, and this will be 012, or actually it's already a new feature, so it's 02, and git push. Normally you don't do this from your development machines, you do this from CI, and we do this in Terraform AWS modules quite nicely. So here we are, I added 020. Now if I go to the Terraform registry side, I don't think I have to wait for a long time. Here it says 01. If I refresh it, it still says 01. Maybe
Unfortunately, you're going to have to wait until Go Releaser is complete. Then there's a little webhook that runs, and Go Releaser can take half an hour. So if we look at the
right.
actions here,
Right.
what we'll see is Go Releaser is running.
Here is it. Right. Yeah, I completely forgot the most time-consuming part to actually run Go release, and this Go release will actually build, I don't know, 10 different packages. And yeah, let's look into this action. I think I edited 2 weeks ago exactly. And here the peculiar part actually was related to signing this release accordingly and dealing with GPG fingerprint, putting this fingerprint into the right place, and allow Terraform registry to trust this GPG was a little bit not straightforward, I would say. But the process is described quite nicely in Terraform documentation, and yeah, as you say, it's all open source. So what we have to do is look into other project, take it from there, and it should be all good. Also, while it's doing something, I can say that in this repository, I added Renovate dependency dashboard, which is taking care of a bunch of different dependencies for me. I don't really need to do pretty much anything about Go or Speakeasy dependency, because Speakeasy itself is taking care of versionings. So I don't have to really pay attention of which version of plugin Go or plugin docs of framework validators is used because it's job of Speakeasy. I have added this one specifically for GitHub Action so that if new version of Go releaser is added, then I probably want to use it. But again, it's outside of Speakeasy's scope. So here we are. I have this pull request being open from version 4.3 to 4.4. I look that they changed some SHA, and just for fun, I can see that there is something new. It's obviously not bad idea to merge it. Okay, while it's doing something in GitHub Action, let's talk a bit about a thing which is, let's go to this one. I have actually a pretty big question, which I'm not sure if we will be able to answer in details, but let's think about this. So the question is, how can I extend the code which was generated by Speakeasy? So as you see this OpenAI schema, it does pretty much everything what I want. What are the patterns or what are the ways to add new resource which is not even in OpenAI schema, but I still want to add it as part of resource?
I mean, so resources are pretty much just defined in the internal provider folder. What Speakeasy is kind of taking ownership of is the resources for everything we've tagged in our API. But there is no reason whatsoever where you can't just add in your own resource and then just add it into the provider.go. So if we look at provider.go, under the hood, what's happening in a Terraform provider is we're defining all the different things that go into setting up an API call. So this is, in their case, the server around the API key. And then we are defining all the resources that make up the OpenAI Terraform provider. And so right now, that's just the three that Speakeasy has created. But I mean, there are use cases often where you would want to make your own resource. If you've got like some particular development flow that you'd want to do, some particular use case, you might want to make like a really thin resource, which is just doing this one thing that's doing it very well. And so to do that, all you pretty much do is writing a new resource into the resources array and start coding. However, I warn you, this is where now you need to learn how to make a Terraform provider again instead of just using Speakeasy, because we're a lot easier than writing code, or that's what I like to think.
Yeah, absolutely. There is big benefit in using Speakeasy for 99% of things, but at some point of time, there are some extra things or extra optimization which are simply not reflected in Open API schema, and that's why you need to do it a little bit manually. I didn't know that provider folder is possible to merge, so that, as you say, if I put new files here, they will not be overwritten, right? They will not be deleted by Speakeasy.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. And
Yeah,
the provider.co will be overwritten by default. There's a few ways of ensuring it isn't. They're not very easy to use right now. They're still a bit experimental. But the very most obvious one is, whenever you could, for instance, like copy paste the image resource and make it the Anton resource. And then you could pass in a reference to the Anton resource into provider.go, and then there'll be just like one line of code in the provider.go that we'd need to maintain. But everything else, so Speakeasy doesn't delete anything that's here. All it's doing is it's kind of controlling the set of files that it's created, and it will continue to overwrite those files unless we go through some of these kind of monkey patch things, which are sort of experimental and not really in our product right now. But if we just were to add that one line of code into provider.go for a new resource, for Anton resource, it would work. There'd be no reason.
Yeah, okay, that's pretty cool. I know that, well, from what I talked to people, they said that they don't have a very well written Open API schema yet, and they want to have provided right away. Will it be right to suggest to them that while they're making Open API schema decent, because it should be generated from the source code, they can have fun and pretty much write small bits of Terraform logic, because it can be quite complicated to express in Open API schema format, so that they can write it in Go. Yes, they need to learn. Unfortunately, they will have to learn quite a bit in the way how Terraform plugin framework operates in general, what kind of components are there. But at certain point, they will be able to generate most of it from OpenAPI YAML file, right? That's
Yeah,
that's a
exactly.
direction.
We can take people 99% of the way there, and they can
Mhm.
do that 1% that they want to do themselves. Whether that be writing, like, covering 90% of their endpoints just fully
Mhm.
automatically, and you've got, that 10% where you really want to make the interface exactly what your customers want, and it's not in your API. Yeah, no problem. You could just you could either kind of eject one of our resources, like just
Mhm.
take it and edit it. It's just code. If we start to go through like the image resource, the embedding resource, any of these, it's the code's a bit weird because it's generated, but it's not that hard.
Mhm.
The main places to look at would be not the underscore SDK ones, but the main kind of resource.go. Um,
Mhm. Yeah.
One of the hard things to do when you're writing a Terraform provider is you've got two separate type structures. You have like a Terraform type structure, and
Mhm.
then you might have like the actual API call that you need to do. And so the Terraform
Mhm.
type structure, you've got loads of kind of type unknown type things. So it's like not only do you have an int, the int
Mhm.
could be null or it could be unknown. And so
Yeah.
the Terraform type structure has to handle loads more cases. So we
Mhm.
make helpers that kind of convert between a Terraform type structure and like a strict kind of SDK type structure.
I
And
see.
that level of conversion is these underscore SDK methods. Um, and so
Mhm.
they can be used pretty much just as is if you were just kind of make a custom thing, and they'll
Yeah.
just kind of go through all these different edge cases for null, unknown, etc. But they could also just be completely ignored, and you could just kind of take the schema structures and do whatever you want. Yeah,
Right. So
it's all
what you're
just
saying,
code.
yeah, what you're saying is that uh, there is a way to, well, obviously to use Speakeasy for 99% of things, but I'm also wondering, uh, are there, like practically, are there cases where the code which is generated by Speakeasy is suboptimal? For example, if I use, as an example, let me see, is it this file? Yeah, for example, this one. So this create function inside of completion resource.go, let's say, uh, can this function be generated in a way that it's unacceptable? For example, it does not uh, know something very important, and that's why I need to somehow extend this specific function or override this function. Um, can you imagine of any of such use cases, or do you guys uh, sure that you implement 100% of Open API specification?
Um,
How?
so I guess there are kind of two responses to that. There's response number one, which is what Speakeasy is doing is it's kind of taking one API call
Mhm.
for one resource and making that work very well. So in
Mhm.
here, we've got an API call for this is what chat completions. And so creating a chat completion is just one API call, creating a completion. And so that's kind of quite simple. Like you can automate that. It's not that hard. But I can definitely see use cases where you don't just want to create a chat completion. Maybe you want to create an embedding and then
Mhm.
create a chat completion using that embedding. And in that case, you've got two API calls. And so there's kind of no real clever way, or none that we've thought of yet, for taking like uh, like a resource which is kind of doing multiple things at once and kind of orchestrating them.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's quite a few reasons why the Speakeasy generated thing might not be perfect. But I do think, like, as long as an API is designed well,
Hmm.
it's often easier just to kind of update your API to do whatever you want to do in Terraform
Yeah.
than it is to kind of try and orchestrate tons of different API calls and squish everything into a single resource. So yeah,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
varies.
Well, yeah, and I think that's a good example. Chat completion and embeddings, uh, like by design, it's supposed to be two different calls. If you want to make it into one big call, what kind of expectation do you have? I mean, it's two different calls, two different. I mean, technically, most likely, it's two different services, even two different endpoints. It can be two different teams working on this, so it's pretty hard to combine them into one. Yeah, one call. I think that's kind of my expectation, at least. Okay, let's look into what has happened with this amazing. What is this? With this amazing action, and is there anything happening even with this action? Go release failed, but okay, let's see. So edit. Oh, it took just 9 minutes. So in 9 minutes, Go releaser was able to produce a bunch of different binaries for all different platforms. That's pretty cool. And it was able to build them for version 0.20. That's what I wanted. Then another big thing is that it was able to make to calculate SHA-256 signature files, and that's exactly the important bit for Terraform registry. Otherwise, it cannot figure out that there are versions of this provider compiled for different architectures. So now if I go to my registry, I still see 0.1. Why? Why do I see 0.1? Is it because I need to refresh something on the registry side? I don't know.
So in theory, there's a webhook that brings this up to date. But I
Yeah.
don't know how
Oh no.
quickly
Yeah. No. It
this
just took.
iterates through. Hey,
It
here we
took.
go.
Yeah. It took a couple seconds before it became visible here. Right. So it was 0.20. That's what I published. Going back to this Go releaser. So what Go releaser did is just publish this as releases. So they are here. That's it. So 6 minutes ago, Go releaser successfully published all of these compiled providers. And then there is webhook, as you said, which I have already set up, and that as soon as new tag is published into OpenAI repository, then Terraform is able to figure out it, and now we can see Hello World on OpenAI provider. Also, this version is somewhat is a bit strange. I'm not sure that I understand where this is coming from. Can you explain why there is 1.12 form while I clearly said that I want 0.20? There is file.
That is a very good question. I actually would want to look into if we're generating the right thing here. My understanding is Terraform registry usually takes the version numbers in our examples and then kind of rewrites them a little bit to be the latest version. But if we look at, for instance, what's in our
Here is,
docs/index.md,
so here is
it's
this.
taking this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, oops, that's a gotcha.
Why it is
So
0.12.4 if I
so
never had more than 0.10?
So this file is manually maintained. I suspect. So okay, there's a few things. When we have a GitHub action
Mhm.
fully configured and set up to regenerate off that one, it will try and update this number automatically and control the version. But here
Mhm.
we've kind of been manually making tags and doing it. So
Mhm.
whatever number is in here will go into our usage snippet.
Mhm.
Now,
Yeah, I
Terraform
see.
usually actually updates that usage snippet to be the latest, regardless of whatever number is defined in the examples folder. But for
Mhm.
instance, if we change this to like 0.20, 0.2.0, and then did our Speakeasy generate and our Go generate, it should make its way to all the
Yeah.
examples.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Most
yeah, no,
likely it will.
it's a sharp edge.
Yeah, most likely it will be. So it's just taken from this file. Mhm. Okay, and let's go back uh, to this page to see what exactly was. So documentation was up to date. Resources were added. So all of this input model and all this stuff is here. Well, I guess the last question which I have in this regards, like what kind of functionality does Speakeasy have, is importing. Will Speakeasy generate code which is required for people to import resources into Terraform state or not?
So it will do a bit of them. So if the resource has a defined ID parameter, and that ID and it has a read or a get operation defined,
Mhm.
it will. Because so to import something into Terraform needs to know the external state so it can reconcile it. So for
Mhm.
instance, here all we've done is we've made the create methods. We haven't done
Yeah,
update, we haven't done delete, we haven't done get. And because of that, there's kind of nothing to reconcile against. If we can
right.
find for instance, in embeddings, if we can find a delete method, a get method, where it will take the state externally and it will bring it in, then we can make an import function that works. Because all we'd need to do on the Speakeasy side is just say, that's the get method, X Speakeasy entity operation, embedding hash get,
Mm.
and then we'll make an import statement that works. And then we could use config driven import. But
Right.
without that, we're sort of a half complete Terraform provider right now.
Right. And as a result of this, there will be a section into README which says how to import it, right?
I believe so. I'm not actually sure. I think importing people don't usually put in the provider documentation. I think it's
No, there
usually
is.
just
No, there is definitely. Well, there is definitely a way to import. Here is it.
got it. Yeah, maybe it would work like that. I actually can't remember how this is automatically generated. This is
Mhm.
from the TF Docs Gen product, so
Well,
it's a HashiCorp product.
yeah, yeah. TF Docs Gen is very smart right now, so they are able to generate quite nice snippets. So it looks pretty cool. In most cases, it's very informative. It has two ways of configuring it. So you can write import block if you're using 1.5, or you can run it yourself like this. Okay, well, I think that's pretty much it for today, actually. Just as a conclusion, I want to say that what we did today, we were able to generate um, one more resource for OpenAI embedding, and well, and we put it into GitHub action pipeline, and after successful uh, release, or after successful execution of Go releaser, we got this Terraform provider updated, and it was successfully picked by Terraform registry. So now there is version 0.20 with one more resource and nice documentation and updated documentation as well. Saying that, I think we are pretty much done for today. Is there anything else what you want to add, Thomas?
Nothing
Famous
more to
last
add. No.
famous last words about anything you want. Feel free to say.
uh, nothing special, nothing insightful. I guess any listeners tuning in now or tuning in later, please check out Speakeasy. Please join our public Slack, ask questions. We have a kind of a white glove service available for companies who don't really want to think about Terraform too much, just want a provider. We try and help you get set up, sort out most of this for you. And we have kind of startup plans and all sorts of other things if you're smaller. So yeah,
Mhm.
no, it's this is in general availability. Looking for whomever we can help make their API work inside the Terraform ecosystem, and similarly all the other IAC ecosystems like Pulumi and CDK.
Yeah, right. Well, this sounds great for many companies who want to get started with Terraform provider. Uh, this is really, I mean, today I added 4 lines of code or 6 lines of code, and we were able to get resource which we don't understand how to work with, but it was good enough. Okay, well, I think that's it for today. I want to say big thanks to you for finding time and for joining and showing and answering a few questions which we had. Thank you, people who joined. Thank you, Vyacheslav. Thank you, Tori. Thank you, Nat. Yeah, have a great day and thanks, everyone. Bye.